What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Tuesday edition of Browns Film Breakdown. Jake Burns here. We have, listen, I think we got a pretty good episode lined up for you. We're going to talk through the first of what is going to be many of these with Scott and myself going through prospects and trying to sort of figure out what the Browns are going to do at 2, and then sort of figure out a little bit more about what they're going to eventually do at some other positions later in the draft. But for now, when you have the second pick in the draft, focusing on those big names, pretty important, especially the quarterbacks. Will hit the two main names, probably hit Jackson Dart too, because that name kind of keeps surfacing itself into the first round. And then obviously we'll go through the Abdul Carters and Mason Grahams and Tet McMillans of the world to talk through what we think of those guys should the Browns potentially stick at 2 and draft somebody else or potentially trade down. Speaking of trading down, did a mock draft over the weekend, and that has been a pretty popular piece for you guys. A lot of movement, a lot of pieces there. And then obviously off of that, did yesterday's podcast talking you guys through it. So if you have not been able to check that out, please go check it out. It's a lot of good information on prospects with a ton of picks, as we know the Browns are going to make. And I made a pretty massive trade with the Raiders in order to gain even more picks. But that is an interesting way of doing it. I don't do it necessarily by the book of the simulator. I try to navigate it in a way that allows us to get the best of both worlds, where you can pick some prospects, but also not every prospect is available that you want to be available at those spots, that sort of thing, because I think you can start making some really phony mock drafts if you go that route. So that's available. Check that out. And otherwise, we're going to do a pretty extensive conversation here on Shedeur Sanders, which is built around the idea that we need to be critical of him, right? At the same time, kind of understanding strengths and weaknesses, while also recognizing, Scott, as you know better than anybody, having been in there, and in and around the building, and obviously doing the scouting and filling out reports and things of that nature, is that like we don't know everything about the kid. We don't know if he's the first one in, the last one out. We don't know what his personality is like when things get hard. We don't know what his football IQ is truly, right? We can get glimpses from social media, different things like that, but we don't know. Can he process? Can he know when is the right time to go from 1 to 2 to 3? Does he understand pre-snap, post-snap movement? Can he call plays in the huddle? Can he get under center? There's a lot of things that we on the outside don't know. What we do know is what we can find on film, and we're going to talk through that, right? So I welcome you in, Scott. How you doing, buddy? Let's get going on this thing, and let's get to talking about some quarterback prospects.
Sounds good, Jake. Good to be here, man.
Yeah, let's do it. So I asked you kind of to pull some of your clips of Shedeur. We're going to get to that. If you are new to what we are doing lately, a lot of what we're doing is some stuff that we're going to talk about on the free podcast side that is a part of what we've always done, but then things that are going to be a little bit more exclusive, a little bit more deep dive. Those that support the website, we're going to provide that for them. That's going to continue here, but it's going to be even a little bit more unique because you can watch the entirety of this episode on Substack or your app or whatever. So we're going to dig into these quarterbacks, obviously starting with Shedeur Sanders, and talk through some of their surrounding pieces. And then if you are an audio-only listener and you want to see the film we talk about after the break, go to the website. That film is there in the full entirety, as is the talking through of this podcast, which we're going to try to do. We're going to try to do podcasts in video form as often as we can, add another little feature to what we're doing here. So we're excited about that. But Scott, I think I've consumed quite a few games. I've tried to take in about 7 of his games. How many did you end up getting to get a picture of what you think of him?
Either 5 or 6.
Okay, so we're talking about a decent number of games. Can't say we picked apart every single game, but you know, we're a couple guys with kids and a life, and we're trying to do our best here to manage all that. So we couldn't get to every single one of them. But I think what we should do is talk first about stepping back and like talking through. I know you were around during the Baker draft sort of sessions, but like that was a different GM. Some of the same people are here. Obviously, Andrew Berry was here for some of that at the time, and obviously, you know, we know that Paul DePodesta and all of that, those guys are around, but they haven't really gotten into the world of drafting quarterbacks all too often, other than Dorian at the end of a draft, right? So it's not been a hugely popular thing. But do you have any vibe on what they're looking for? Do you have any vibe on traits they like, what they're trying to pick apart with these guys to give anybody an inkling of you know, I don't know, just the process internally that you have any idea that they look for with these guys?
Well, hold on. Now you forgot Cody Kessler and Deshaun Kaiser. They drafted those guys.
That's true. That's true. Easy to blank those out of your mind at some point, right?
Exactly. I try to every day. So going off of like the reports that we wrote, like quarterback reports specific for the position, the kind of like highlighted areas were anticipation, decision-making, accuracy, and athleticism, on top of some other, you know, position specifics or just other tools that like we had to evaluate, but those four were like the ones that kind of got a little bit more attention. So I, in terms of a quarterback that like kind of, Baker, again, it was different GM, so like he wanted different stuff, different things were highlighted. So it's not like apples to apples. I think like you want a big thing with AB since he's come back was like just being in sync with Kevin and like in sync with the coaching staff, with the players that we would take. Cause like, too often you're just GMs will just take guys just to take them because they're the best player available, but like they're not necessarily the best fit for the scheme or what the coaches want, even, or like coaches might hate the player as a college prospect, and then you're going to bring him in anyway because you think he's the best player, and then nobody's happy with what you got realistically. So like it was always trying to marry it together. So I think at least when Kevin first got here, like think you wanted with Baker was off play. How does he work off play action? How does he work off rollouts? Is how mobile is he? So there's a little bit more like scheme specific factors that go into it. But like I said, those four big ones: anticipation, athleticism, accuracy, decision making. Those are like the ones that can kind of go across the board for all quarterbacks. And then on top of that, like you can't have a guy that has a noodle arm, it's just historically it's like not going to work. He's got to be like the smartest guy ever who can process things 1,000,000% better than everybody else because he's got to make up for his arm. But you also don't want a guy that has a rocket arm but can't put any touch on it or just totally inaccurate. So, it's like I said, it's focused on those four, but like it's just really like, and then also he's got to be like you got to show leadership, kind of what you said before, like as you get the background on the guy when scouts go into the schools, like that's where you get all that information. And if you're like a scout who's been around for a while, if you have connections within that school, or like sometimes what happens if coaches, if a kid comes into a school, now it's a little different. Obviously, with NIL, guys go wherever they want every year, but like, if a kid came in as a freshman, played a little bit, the strength coach say went to a different school the next year, or like his position coach went to be a coordinator at a different school, happened to be in like your area, scout could then talk to that guy when he went into the other school, be like, hey, what can you tell me about this guy? So like that's where you get like the leadership capabilities, the mental aptitude. Again, you're not going to get like everything, unless that coach is like super convinced that you're not going to say anything. Like the coaches are all paranoid, especially college coaches. They're super paranoid about stuff getting out, which like if you did that as a scout, you wouldn't be let in any building across the country. So like that's
right.
not going to happen. But they're paranoid, but like you can still get what you need to get out of them. So like you learn that, and like bringing it back to the quarterback, like you want him to be a leader. You want him to be able to like handle adversity, and you learn that from the background. So it's obviously like with every position, it's a big boiling point of like where everything goes into, the final evaluation. But yeah, like those four traits, and then kind of like, is he a leader? Has he been a winner in college? Because like that, you can have all the talent in the world, but like if you go 3-9, 4-8, like you're 2 or 3 years as a starter, what are you really telling us? Like like you can't elevate if you can't elevate the players around you. Like Josh Allen was a good example. Like back in that draft, like his junior year or second to last year, like he had a bunch of receivers that went to the league, and that was his best year in college. And then his last year, like took a bit of a step back because he lost that talent. But like just because of how good he is, like he was still able to perform and show how good of an athlete and good of a quarterback he could be. And it's obviously worked out for him so far. But like you gotta show that you can make the other guys around you better. I think that's a big thing that like every team probably focuses on, but the Browns for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's like I said, there's a lot that goes into it, but it's like it's those four traits, and then kind of like, can you make other players better while you're on the field?
Right. So, like you said, man, a lot of that's obvious. I mean, to the
Yeah.
extent of categorically obvious, right? There's obviously categories baked into accuracy. Is somebody pinpoint? Is somebody generally accurate? What's the ball placement look like, right? The same for arm strength. It's just an umbrella term, but you got to kind of dig into the nitty gritty of it, right? What's his ability to throw off platform? What's his ability to throw with just the arm? What's his ability to throw on the run? How far can he throw it when he gets everything into it, right? That all plays into it. Processing is the same, umbrella of, can he do it pre-snap? Can he carry that over to post-snap? Is he confused by movement after the snap? Right? Is he able to, process leverage? I think that's an important thing to understand, because like when quarterbacks drop back, you're not saying to yourself, oh, cover 6 all the time. I mean, there's some times where you're like, pre-snap, this is cover 2. I can tell by the way this backside safety's playing or whatever. I mean, there are tells, but like, you're not in your brain, you're not thinking, oh, cover 8, right? Like you're not doing some of those intricate, nope, this is stubby. I know that from the Saban playbook, right? Like there's not that going on, but what you are doing is reading leverage, right? You have an invert defender or two you're usually taking care of. What's that guy doing? Is he press? Is he bailing? What's he doing post snap? There's just that processing piece that's really important pre to post, I think, is a huge part of it. Can they read leverage? Can they read depth perception is a huge part of it. Can they process out the distance? Like, not, hey man, is a guy playing flat coverage, but no, does a guy have, is my post working with enough speed to outrun that safety when he has to flip the hips and quarters and run with him, or whatever it is, right? That stuff is kind of the deeper detail stuff that matters. And then on top of what you said, the decision making, are you making the right throw in the moment? Are you giving your team the best chance to win by doing the decision that you make, right? Drifting into a sack, trying to create when there's nothing there, trying to throw deep in a situation that doesn't require it. There's a lot of moving parts there, and I think that's what you try to dig into when you look at these, at least as best you can, but by each player specifically. And that's what we're going to try to do, at least with the top two, and then kind of go through at least some of our, some of the players that we've. I think I wouldn't say they're the top guys, but I think, like you said, Dart will get his chance to be in there and have his opportunity to be picked apart, because I think he's kind of pushed in that direction. And then, there's some other middle fringe names, the Will Howards, the McCords, the Tyler Shows has done a nice job this off season, right? Kind of getting some press around him. So I think that's it. And really what it boils down to is, at least for two, with these first two guys we're talking about, because I don't know how you feel about it, Scott, but you can really justify a lot of second and third round quarterbacks for just taking swings, but you're not just taking a swing at 2. You got to be pretty certain at 2 that this is a choice that makes the most logical sense, and you can't be swayed by perception. So I am kind of curious to figure out. Let me ask you this from your perspective. Do you think they need to take a quarterback at 2? Do you think they're at the point with the group they have, right, and with the situation they put themselves in the cap, where they almost borderline need a miracle at the position? Do you think they have to take, because what I'm getting at is, you can have the second pick with 2 likely quarterbacks there, right? That can make some sense, but maybe you're not in love with one of them and you don't go that route, right? But are they at the point where they have to be just like, hey, we'll date the guy because we need a miracle here to move on? Like that I think is a really fair question based on the Watson situation they put themselves in.
No, I think that's a fair question. I think that's a fair question for any team who is picking high but is not number one and needs a quarterback, because especially depending on whoever has the first pick, if you think they need a quarterback or they might take a quarterback, then you don't have your pick of whoever you want when you come up. So I think when you don't have the first pick, you have to, I mean, I know 2 is only 1 pick away, but you have to I think you have to be in love with that guy. You can't afford to just take a shot. If you're coming in, I'll say it, if you're coming into a situation where everybody got fired after you had an awful year, and if the team had an awful year and you're picking second, you got a little bit more wiggle room to take a guy that okay, he's going to have to take his lumps for a year, but I really believe that as a coach, I believe I can develop him into what we need. I believe we have the pieces, or we can get the pieces to make him great.
Yeah.
That's where you have more leverage. I think the situation that they're in, you got to believe in this guy. You got to believe that you can put him out there week 1 and he's gonna get going right off the bat. Like they can't afford for a rookie quarterback to come in and need 6, 7, 8 games to get going. And it's week 9 and you're going into it at 2-6 or 3-5, and you're way out of the playoffs already. And then like, okay, maybe cranks it up at the end of the year, but like they can't afford that. So, I don't know if I think you got to be in love with the guy pretty much at this point. With the situation they're in, they have to think this is the guy I know I can win with him, and we're gonna go do it. Like, and you got to be gung ho about it to draft that guy too, in my opinion,
Yeah.
with where
Yeah.
they're at this year.
Even with the pressure, I think that is out there publicly, we have no idea that there's pressure internally like this, but publicly there's a pressure around Andrew and Kevin to win this year. And really the thing that could help them, and I don't want to be too deep in the weeds on this, but is a rookie quarterback coming in and showing some, you know, progress, right? This young man, look, we're kind of pushing in that direction. Look what we did with him. So I am interested to see if they go the veteran route and they pair, even if they take one of these two quarterbacks at the top with them and almost go the Penix route and play it patient until you can't play it patient anymore. We'll ultimately see, but I am very, very interested in the unique position they've put themselves where they might not love one of these two. You can like a guy and it could still work out, right? But you really want them to be in love with one of the guys they take, but they're also up against it and they really need a quarterback rookie contract miracle. They just do. They really do. So we'll see if that sways the opinion. But I wanted to pull up and look through some of the PFF data here because I do think quarterback charting is one of the things that I think they do very well. And when you're looking at quarterback charting, Scott, I think there's an interesting thing that goes on here. So like just Shedeur, I mean, the top 3 guys in the draft, passing grade wise, are Jackson Dart at a 91.9 and 91.7 for Cam Ward, and Shedeur is a 90.9. So they're all in the that's actually total offense. So 91.9, 91.7, 90.5. So all very similar. Shedeur had 26 big time throws, and those are usually exceptional throws made into tight windows, or you're escaping chaos, pressure, making a throw downfield. That definition is a little loose, but think of big time throws as wow plays. That's kind of the way I would think of it, and usually gets charted by a lot of organizations the same way. So we had 26 of those, to 31 from Ward and 30 from Jackson Dart. The difference here is his turnover-worthy plays. He only had 8 turnover-worthy plays, but he had 10 interceptions. So you're talking about 2 interceptions beyond the turnover-worthy plays. So that speaks to either tipped balls happening, receiver issues happening, or some other factor playing into it. Whereas you look at Jackson Dart had 11 turnover-worthy plays and only 6 interceptions, and then 18 from Cam Ward to only 7 interceptions. So that can speak to a little bit of fortune in that regard, right? Now, I think the thing that is the biggest thing to talk about with him, which we'll get to, is the pressure to sack rate is pretty high. So his pressure to sack rate is 20.1, which is pretty high comparatively. Like Ward's is 15.9. And Jackson Dart's is also pretty high. So these are pressures that convert to sacks at a 19.2. But the pressures, the pure number of pressures is where it gets kind of interesting. 204 pressures for Sanders, 145 for Cam Ward, and 146 for Jackson Dart. So you're talking about, 20% more pressures on a season-long basis, which I do find to be pretty interesting, because you would agree with me, and we'll break this down as we talk about strengths and weaknesses, Scott, that he invited pressure. He definitely had issues where he would bring the pressure in, but I also know that offensive line, not very talented. And I would say that they put a lot of pressure on that offensive line to perform, and they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback to maneuver around that offensive line to find answers in a very wide attack that involved using all 53 lateral yards.
Yeah, I agree with you. He was under fire a lot, especially against the better defenses. His first year at Colorado. I mean, Dion made whatever he said in the offseason, like, I'm gonna go get a new offensive line, with the transfer portal. Like, I mean, it's been known that Colorado had offensive line issues, but Shedeur also, as you said, he kind of like walked himself into it, a lot more than you want. And I mean, he took a
Yeah.
lot of hits that he could have avoided, in my opinion. And I think that it's not, it's just a combination of like he's trying to do a lot because I think the way the offense was, he needed to let plays develop. But that also put, as you said, put his offensive line in a really bad spot because they're just not
Yeah.
that good. And then you're asking them to block for 3 seconds at a play, or like you're just asking them to do a lot when they're already at a disadvantage. And then you
And
want
they didn't like block any, they didn't do anything to really help them at times. There was
right,
no backfield deception to slow down the pass rush upfield. There was very few times tight ends are involved in a
yep,
way that allows one edge to be slower upfield than the other, which, as you know, creates a different form of a pocket and allows a quarterback to maneuver and get around to different places. The way I would just phrase this, Scott, and I'm curious if you agree with me, because I'm hoping we don't agree on every single thing here, but like I just feel like he had a lot of pressure from his own systems and structure to make this offense happen. Like while there are times I think in some of these other quarterbacks where I'm like, all right, there's pretty clear schematic stuff that they're doing to get to the places they want to go. It felt like a lot of what Shedeur is doing is driven by he's the one that has to move this for us. If he doesn't see it, if he doesn't process it, he doesn't anticipate it, he didn't get the football out, like they're done. The run game was so rough for them at times. And I just feel like you said, the talent up front is really counterintuitive to what I think you were trying to do. But I think there's also a world where Pat Shermer, I know Browns fans don't hold in the highest regard, but like, what else were they going to do schematically? They have a really gifted group of wide receivers and a gifted quarterback. I can understand a little bit of where they're coming from with that stuff, but I also just felt like the pressure put on the offensive line really started to impact Sanders throughout the year. I just felt like there was a lack of cohesion and trust that just started to me started to play out throughout the year. And I think it wore on him. You look at like the BYU game, the Nebraska game, some of those others, like there's just so little help. Like everything was on his shoulders all the time, which is good for college evaluation, the situation, but like it's a part of you have to take into account when you're talking about what's the mental burden on a kid in this situation. Whereas, and we'll break down Cam and Jackson, there's special parts of what those guys do, but like the play calling in Ole Miss is pretty good, man. And I think that the talent around Cam in Miami was pretty damn good. And I think collectively in the running back group was pretty good. So, yeah, man, I don't know. I'll just kind of leave it at that. But I wonder if you had that similar takeaway of the way they went about processing the offensive football down there or over there, I guess.
yeah. No, I mean, I agree with a lot of it. Like, I think there's times on the film where he's not necessarily taking what the defense is giving him. If there was a shorter mid range route concept called, so like he wouldn't always just take the easy throw. Like, kind of seemed like he wanted to be the one to push it downfield and let it develop longer when the right decision or like just an easy decision would be take the 6 yard hitch and then you're in a better situation on second and short or whatever it is. You're just in a better situation in the next play instead of having to backpedal to try to avoid cover or pressure, and then everybody's just in a scramble drill and you're kind of just like you're hoping for some luck there to get somebody open and complete it. So yeah, I think it's a mix of they definitely wanted to be, I don't know if it's more attacking or just a little bit more like push it downfield more in general. But when they did kind of give him shorter stuff, especially even if it's like Hunter running like a hitch or like a slant, like he's open and sometimes he doesn't see him. So like it's
Yeah.
a bit of a and it could be like throughout the course of the game he's feeling pressure like every other rep. Like okay, he's like I need to find like this guy's going to be here. Or I think he's going to be here pre-snap. I'm going to look at him no matter what. He's not there. Oh crap! Like I got to go do something different. So I think like it was a mix of like they didn't necessarily adjust well offensively to their O line or just making it a little bit easier on the quarterback anyway. But there's definitely something to be said about him not just like taking what's given to him either. So there's a
Yeah.
lot there to process. But as with everything football, like it's a combination of different factors.
Yeah, no doubt. Couldn't agree more. I think those are fair parts to lay out in terms of, the factors going on around him. I do think there's some stuff, like you mentioned, underneath opportunities, quick throw opportunities that I just don't think they're very good at collectively. Now, is that something that, as you talk to him on the whiteboard, as you get to know him in the process, and as we know, it came out Sunday that he's not going to actually throw at the combine, he's going to throw at his pro day, which is becoming very common. It's not even really that newsworthy to me anymore. So fewer guys, like in the next 10 years, the combine is going to end up just being all pro days. Like I really do think it's going to get to that point, which is a bummer, but there's so much pressure in the combine. I can understand why guys would be like, I want to run at my school. I want to run at my place, do that. It's just a bummer that that's working the direction it is. But again, not abnormal. He's going to do a lot of whiteboard work and talk to teams. And yeah, I think that the question you're asking right there of watching some, I would, pick 25 plays this year where he didn't throw the first initial what is open and why. Like, why is that not a part of your read? Are you guys, is it a part of your opportunity within this structure to decipher what read 1, 2, and 3 is, where you get to pick based on the pre-snap look? Or is this a very regimented thing where he's telling you, the OC's telling you what the first, second, third read is, and you have to go by that book? So that's just stuff that we have to delineate. I think he can do it. I don't know why at times it wasn't accomplished, right? Again, scoreboard chasing, big play hunting. I know that can happen in college, especially, you know, big names, big moments, trying to chase Heismans and stuff like that. I understand, man, like that can happen, but that isn't the way the NFL game is played when these guys get into it. So then it just becomes a matter of what they can do. So, yeah, 4,133 yards, obviously pretty strong to reach that number, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. All of that stuff is pretty good. There's nothing that lies outside the ordinary, but we're going to pick apart some film. And I think when picking apart film, we want to hit on strengths and weaknesses. And obviously we're going to do that as we talk through the tape. And then we're going to kind of give some of our other anecdotal notes that we put together too. So if you are in the world of supporting Browns Film Breakdown, come check us out. That's where you'll find the video form of the film clips that we have, the rest of the pod. You can find them there. Even if you're listening to this on the premium side, you're going to have to, I mean, you can listen to the audio if you prefer. It'll all be there. But if you want to get the most out of the experience, I think you should try to find an opportunity to watch us break down some clips, about 10 minutes of film on Shedeur that we're going to go through. So we'll take a quick break, come back from break, and that's where you will find us if you are on the free side. Thanks for joining us today. Like I said, check out the mock draft from the other day and then the podcast from yesterday explaining that if you missed it as well. And we'll have some more. Maybe get to Cam Ward by the end of the week and keep pushing the foot on the pedal and try to get as many of these done as we can by the time of the draft, all working around free agency and all that fun stuff too. So a lot going on. It'll be busy, a lot of content coming for you in the next 2-3 months. So we're excited about that. Like I said, be back after the break. Stick around. Let's watch some film together. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to run through some film as best we can and just kind of roll through clips and talk about what we see, what matters, what jumps out. A lot of good stuff early. Going to get to some of the stuff that's negative a little later. So, yeah, Scott, jump in whenever you feel inclined to do so. A little 3x1. Let's go through again and watch what they're trying to do to the trip side, because that's where we're processing out. It's like we're getting quarters. Actually, might be getting a little cover 6 down into the boundary here. And this is kind of indicative of what the route concepts are. So a lot of benders in between coverage, a lot of kind of hook curl read concepts that they put together. Where like we end up with these sorts. This is the stuff that's they're just kind of sloppy, Scott, at times, like just kind of capping each other over here. But talk me through what stood out to you for this clip, and then we'll keep moving too.
Yeah, no, I hear you with the scheme stuff. But I mean, I like this. He hits his back foot, and obviously he's under pressure. I mean, this is though. So we talked about the O-line already. Like, this is North Dakota State, obviously like a premier FCS team, but like you're an FBS school, and your tackles are getting burned by their DN. So, but he feels it
interior push too, because if you look at the top of his drop, he wants. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, buddy, but what it looks like to me is that they're trying to get this bender in the middle of the field open. And when he hits the top of the drop right here, he's dealing with this chaos and then 2 high side chaos players, because this is the throw. You throw it anticipatorily, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I agree with it. And I think he couldn't step into it. But what I do like is he found the escape route, which like he doesn't always find, as we'll get into later, but finds it quick, moves to his right. And then on the move, I think this is a good throw here downfield to the sideline. I think that when he's when he's like rolling out in structure, I think he's a lot better on the move in terms of a thrower and like accuracy. When he's kind of improvising, it can get a little iffy. Now this one he's got it's basically becomes a rollout because he's got all this space and he doesn't have anyone bearing down on him. But good ball to the side, gets a good chunk here. And yeah, just I like the footwork. Got out of the pocket, found the guy, and obviously like he adjusted when, as you said, he's got pressure in his face right away, taking away probably his first read. But he figured it out and got the first down.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, kind of some things you hit on there. Don't think he's great at finding escape routes. I think oftentimes he thinks that the pressure is eluded by drifting. We'll talk through some of that. It's just a bad habit that he's got to get out of. His pressure plan has to be forward thinking, not reverse thinking. And I think too often he tries to put himself into drift mode. And I think that this is an example of what he needs to get more consistent at: climbing, evaluating ways to get out of the pocket and make those plays happen. Because the NFL rush plans get a little more intricate, right? So we're back to 3x1 on this one. Watching it through, this looks just like a little mesh concept. So we're going to get the two number 3 here in the slot, kind of coming across here. Usually teams will try to high-low mesh here and then usually pair some things with a dig over top or something like that. So let's walk through what happens on this one. All right, again, good clean climb like you talked about. The footwork for him between some of the others, I think is the best. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, climb, good ball security, right? This teach tape stuff. Pretty good job finding. So they're actually running. This is interesting. You don't often see a double dig with mesh, but this is something that can work. I have not seen it very often. So you're running this mesh, and he can take. This is really what we're trying to do here, Scott. And this is just me rambling, and then you can obviously throw it back to you. Is that these are good man beaters. So we want to have options to beat man. These are good man beaters. If you read out zone, I'm looking here. I'm feeling like you're getting some variation of what's going to be a closed field coverage, or if we get a roll out here, we're going to get into the high part of it. But we're getting zone. Everything about it smells like zone, and then we're getting 2 dig players behind this mesh concept. So this is an NFL level concept, just to be clear. This is something you do see on Sundays. So this is pretty good though, man. 5 steps, climb, push forward, and then find the second dig, which is coming into the window, which is a yak opportunity, right? This is what I like. You hit the first dig, kind of DOA, right? It's not necessarily going to be a great opportunity with 2 players at this spot barreling down on him, right? But if you get to the second dig, to your really good football player, big time yards after catch opportunity. You like to get Travis upfield a little more, but you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah. And we could probably do a deep dive into like how much he's focusing in on Hunter, like on certain plays when he, like by the scheme of the play, he might not be the number 1 option, but he just locks into his guy. But like this is a perfect, I think a perfect like step up, like you talk into the pocket. Like he feels the pressure, understands that he's got some space to operate, and then he gets a lot behind it because he's stepping into the throw. Like his arm is kind of a point of contention and